In the great scheme of things, playing piano seems so superficial and vain. Let less trying to play it well, subtle. But when I think about what inspired me when I was a child in music was that somehow I didn't know it, but a lot of the world was within the notes. The perception of the meaning of the world, the universe, who knows? And often I think it's a privilege to do what you love in order to deepen and earnestly transmit your experience, but also, more than that, the meaning of it all. Because young generations come with their other perspectives and another time frame and another civilizational paradigm. So it keeps humbling oneself to realize how passing all this is. And it's the more I think, feel, act, give, transmit, I feel like there is a moment where some grains are placed in the harvests of these incredibly driven individuals who, perhaps in doubt, perhaps in search, reach at some point the fruition of the meaning of their life, which in turn is inspirational to others. The message perhaps more than the person. In this case, I'm totally, for me, aware of that from the grandness of Mademoiselle Boulanger, who placed the works at a higher pedestal than even the composers of the works. The creation by itself, in general terms, not only in music. And I think the narcissism that goes with self-search, self-betterment, could appear ephemeral and perhaps lacking a meaningful engineering, in that sense of the word, societal contribution. After all, the souls are something that the Greeks considered to be part of the breath, psyche, or psyche. Therefore, to be engineering souls in terms of working on the aspects of what our souls, our psyches are experiencing, understanding or misunderstanding on the great scheme of things of what's going on, or towards where things are going on, and what is our perspective in it, and mostly what is our purpose in it. And perhaps that is the philosophical abyss, the purpose. But when you connect in daily life with future musicians who come trusting you, as they do when they come to me, and I'm very, very honored and humbled by their trust, to explore the musical universe or the perspective on all these creation by composers who passed away a long time ago, but whose proximity in the daily search for betterment of their musical message or narrative content or structural mindset. It's a great responsibility, because ultimately nobody detains the truth about anything really of these matters, because after all, the same piece of music, even famous, means so many different things to so many different musicians. It's like consulting many doctors about some ailment that you feel the psychological or physiological effects of, but all of them give you different diagnosis. And so it's easy at the end to be confused at best, or to put in relativity the fact that in subjective matters there is hardly objective opinions that can be set in stone. Trends, ways of interpretational, emotional content, uh, different ears, different perspectives, different instruments, all out of context, when the music of their time was the music of their own time and not so much the music of their past that they explored little. A little access, short life. There was a sense of urgency that animated many of them and left us with these priceless gifts that we cherish as musicians, and hopefully are the truly earnest, vibrant membrane for the audiences, be them knowledgeable in the musical idiom or just hearing that storytelling. Is it a foreign language translation? Is it that universal language, tension release, dissonance, consonance through music? I don't know. I have thought so, like many. But then you realize that, like in every passion or every intense connection one has to a form of human culture idiom, folk or savant or combined, it's fascinating to see how many shades there are to every art form, to every genre within the genre, and how meaningful it becomes to people who become as aficionados almost intolerant to other forms of it or other aspects of it. And I think it's beautiful that aesthetics can bring such high passions like sports, and hopefully away from wars. It's not about possession, it's about sharing. Oh, I know those words seem very lame, but sometimes I find that there is a purpose to it, to deal with artful things, poetic things, intangible things, a philosopher's thought, a painter's gaze, a poet's choice of a word. They reach our psyche as deeply as a parental situation of care or teacher's attention to shaping young generations' ways of becoming, or world events, tragic or sometimes inevitably, in which our little lives are involved without to be consulted. Trends towards new ways of thinking, the meaning of transport, the meaning of time, the meaning of life, the length of life, the capacity to have science bring us to levels that generations or two might have appeared science fictional at best. The fears, the threats, but also the connections, and therefore I find that fascinatingly inspirational. To wake up every morning, to come and discover a piece, rediscover the piece under the perspectives of a student, and realize that this piece is not like a painting set in the gallery and then people just look at it. It's to be recreated from scratch, like cooking a meal with specific ingredients and specific dosages. And all these subtleties bring to the pleasure to create your own out of what already exists. Let less perhaps create your own anyway, in turn. To a certain extent, improvisation and composition were part of interpretation in the past. Now, the perspective in the professional field of classical music is more about performance of published editions to recite properly to a certain point likely in order to prove one's level of capacity to handle them literally, physically on the piano. And then, while on this journey, which is seemingly a little bit more like a puppets and a puppeteer, there are these elements between the lines in the music score that are hinted and which mean different hints to different people. And I'm very attuned. I try to. I'm really not waking up every morning to impose my way of thinking of the piece. I try to find the solution for reliable fingering, an ergonomic handling of a section to give the student the capacity to be more confident when the stage performance calls for so much nervous control of oneself in order to deliver all what one has prepared, since it's ephemerally to be rebuilt every time we start from scratch. And all that takes incredible courage to not give up. And you can wonder, why is it so important not give up something that is in fact relatively selfish, to try to better one's own piano playing? But if it has a meaning to somebody at some point of your life, it can impact them like a film does, a script of a film does, a narrative. Now, the form of the story and the way the genre is presented evolves with time, but there is a necessity for humans to daydream, some kind of level of escapism. And I find that it allows humans to dream, but not in their subconscious, like at night or whenever they have a nap, but to dream in the sense of imagine things beyond the reality. And even if the reality is harsh and very often cruel, it's difficult to hope for such things. All these kind of thoughts blossom in me when I discover every new student's entering in encounter with a piece with which I, let's say, have lived for the last many decades. And that fresh perspective brings the piece to the level where it's still a very young work. A work that awaits the gaze, the ear, the fingers, the soul of a new performer. Not that you reveal something others didn't, or perhaps you do unwillingly, unknowingly. It's not the purpose in the get-go. I think it's about humbly enough entering in a world where the idiom is meaningful to us while set in another time, but incredibly present. As present as new music of today, equally. I know people choose to ignore the one or prefer the other and look the perspective and say in the past that music was their own present, as I said earlier. And today we play more the music of the past than our own present. It's up to us to be more active, obviously, by conviction, not by obligation, by attraction, by an acquired taste. And I find that one can have difficulty acquiring a taste for things from the past as well as for the music of today. It's not because it's today that is more evident or more mysterious, even if today's music is really plural in the sense of the fact that we have so many musical idioms and styles of almost a language, a composer, compared to the communal, let's say, tonal system harmonic language of centuries past, which didn't inhibit at all the individual personalities and time styles of romantic, baroque, classical, rococo, galant style composers. And yes, it is music as a soup, but no, you have specifics to each taste and to each culture, language, time period, perspective of the generosity of how you think about the pulse, the rhythm, the phrasing, the melody, the harmony, which way you enter in the piece as a composer and which way you enlight it or highlight it with your own subjective point of view as a performer. It's an encounter around an existing, in fact, text, since we don't have recordings of the past performers of their own music. Speak of course, 18th and early 19th century, mostly for the pianist repertoire, but even earlier with the harpsichord and the organ and the lute. And so there is something universal yet so unique to each of these. And the piano as a modern instrument, while not specific to any of these idioms and genres and styles, is able to play all of them. So in the eyes of purists, for each of these niches or time periods specifically, it's a lost in translation situation, and I accept that. It's true. Imitating the old instruments on the new is also kind of an awkward way to do things because it's hybrid. I mean, I think the composers tended to transcend the instruments they had, not because they found them limiting, as we might, with some lack of modesty, think of it today in the perspective of the centuries before, but more because I think they imagined, literally imagined, universes that were not limited by any of the means that they used to put them on the paper through to sound. And I find that fascinating how few signs on a paper come alive and become something that becomes a treasured solace for our inner worlds, individually, like when you read a book on your own in a crowded place, or by yourself somewhere isolated, or you enter in your own daydream of, yeah, it's escapism again, like that word, because in a way it says it well. You're here while you escape, and in the moment of this ambivalent situation, I think you travel in time, you travel in your own idea of what time then was for them. And all technical aspects of length of sound, acoustics, resonance, expectation of projection, tone engineering, captivating the sound in a salon, in a hall, all these elements of the medium that we deal with, I find that ultimately it's all in the essence, the phrase, the trajectory, the gesture, the melodic line, all the ingredients cannot make for the perfume or unforgettable perfume of a melodic line. Of course, savant music is fascinating, how to combine things in contrapoint, how to combine things atonally, how to combine things. And then there is also the perspective of how these combinations work on our inner world imagination. Why does it trigger in us that sense of timelessness, hope, or perhaps plenitude or mystery, or perhaps even a need to explore inner abysses that we cannot even put words on? Of course, you have purposeful music for events such as dance, sing, pray, which are part of the exaltation of our being, soulful and human, physical, and sharing, and jubilation that is truly meaningful to us as humans, while so individual to each of us from where we come, perspectives, backgrounds, languages. Perhaps all these limitations are necessary, and music is a little bit of a go-between. But music is not music, is the music in plural, of course, the many. And serving the muse is a daily privilege, luxury, and humbling responsibility towards new generations. No matter what you are involved in, when you're connected to it by earnest self-search and not self-absorbed, I think that's a student that I was when I was. I think I was more inspired by my teachers, and God forbid I had many, each of their own way to live the meaning of the trade which they got so accomplished in. Yehudi Menuhin on the violin, Richter on the piano, Khachaturian in the composition, Bernstein in conducting. And not only all of these, because there were more complex personalities than only that aspect of them, but let's say to name one main trade, which was considered at the time for each of them, Rostropovich on the cello, capacities to embody through their craftsmanship and their unbelievable discipline technique, the artistry which inspired me to attend a concert of Bach Suite by Rostropovich, or so many things that can come to mind. And these kind of milestones are not per se the lessons, the classes, the perspectives, the paths that you use to go through, and everybody tries to find the right one towards their elusive or hopefully directly inspirational goal. But sometimes we are in this wandering, and that wandering is also very healthy because it allows us to be open to, in doubt, you're open to other options. And ultimately, like when I teach, I like to give perspectives. What if the composer has done this instead of that? In order to go back to what he or she wrote and then really give it the meaning that connects us to it. If not, why play it if it's just to recite it only? To recite it with a conviction, not to appropriation, because then you should write your own. But, and then again, even at these perspectives, the things are more subtle than they appear. It's not just recite, it's not just recompose, it's not only retell with a certain rubato that is more signature yours, because in any case, you can today more than ever, because of the availability of the points of view of a given piece by many musicians, as a student have access to so many ways a same piece can mean to people. And of course you can operate by rejection, as many young people do, in order to create their own criteria. And I try analytically to build their criteria as well on the side by saying, okay, you dislike this, you prefer this. I think this is what we have to think about, how to approach the meaning of it. And I find that in that humble exchange, when both gaze the same text, the teacher who's supposed to know and the student who's supposed to learn, in fact, I wonder who learns more from each other, and how both, in fact, learn a lot from the score by having the privilege to work on it, because it seems to be that these pieces are fruits or fruit trees, so to say, by analogy, that keeps on giving. I know it sounds like cliches to say all these words, but I've lived them so far, and I'm grateful for those who trust me to share them with them for their own path forward. And I am so admirably enthused when I see what they do with these pieces that they play, how they put meaning in the perspectives, because then I see their paths forward, and I realize how lucky I was to have been a few lessons long, their companion in exploring these appealing mysteries or compelling truths which we seek in the score, beyond what it originally, in the first place, already charms ourselves in the most meaningful sense of the word charm. So I'm just very grateful to have been so far able to transmit in my best of abilities, compared to Mademoiselle Boulanger's phenomenal abilities, what is timeless, in fact, in my opinion, and that beyond trends and traditions, and yeah, you can find something which becomes your own egg in your own nest. And I find that to be, in fact, we cannot explain the pieces. We can try to define them in order to organize them, in order to in our perspective of practicing them, to learn them, the craftsmanship of it, which is as valuable as the artistry that comes out of this craftsmanship once you can play the expected, you know, elements of this or that technical demand, polyphony, ornaments, shiftings, trills. Take them alone, they don't mean much, but put them together in a piece of music coming from somebody's perspective. I find that to be fascinating. Of course, the pieces, but the fact that it means something for which students come from so far away to seek some kind of answer, more or less verbalized, more or less, less than more put in words, because in fact we cannot define the pieces, we only can serve them, and in doing so we define more ourselves towards how to play them, how to think them, how to mean them. And of course, we're never satisfied with ourselves, generally, because, or particularly me, because it seems to be in perpetual evolution. And I hear a student play and I go, oh, this is what this piece is about in this section. And it's revealed to me. And I find that when I have students or former students who play pieces which I've myself had difficulty defining the perspectives, and thinking there must be something into it that I don't get yet. It's not a given element, it's a combination of things, and all of a sudden becomes luminous. That's so humbling. That's why between the teacher and the taught, one wonders often who learns more. Perhaps both, hopefully. Well, it takes humility to accept that you misunderstood something or you searched for something that you couldn't find. And I find it so truly rewarding soulfully when I teach a student of a student, and I find that these little grooves that are perhaps as ephemeral as steps in the sand before this wind blows them, or sand castles on the beach before the wave erases them, but during this ephemeral moment of our life with the piece, and that sharing with it, there's something that we take away from it and we carry it in us as in fact as nourishment, really, for our souls.